Did dinosaurs really dominate the Earth in the Jurassic? During our period to the Triassic period, we learned that this first period of the Mesozoic was synonymous with renewal. It was as if the maps of terrestrial biology and geology had been redrawn. A new world was being built, and the pillars of a new living order were taking shape. The Triassic is like a springboard, leading to the luxuriant flora and fauna of the Jurassic. Remember, the Triassic period began after a major mass extinction, undoubtedly one of the largest the Earth has ever experienced. Combining terrestrial and marine losses, some researchers estimate that up to 95% of species disappeared from the Earth's surface during this period. Yet after several thousand years, the living world was rebuilt on new foundations. If the Triassic is synonymous with renewal, it is also defined as a period of transition. It began on the ashes of the Permian, the last period of the Paleozoic, and gives rise to the Jurassic, where everything really begins for many of the leading species of the Mesozoic. Over millions of years, plant, marine, and terrestrial species managed to regain a certain equilibrium. As after every biological crisis, the living world adapts and renews itself. The supercontinent of Pangaea no longer exists, fragmented by the Atlantic and Tethys oceans. Marine reptiles set out to conquer marine waters, while dinosaurs diversified alongside the first birds and numerous insects. It's also the age of gigantism. Dear traveler, welcome. Today we're setting off on a new time expedition to discover the age of giants. But how and why? Who are these Jurassic giants? Is it right to talk about the era of the giants? But before you set off on a new adventure, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing. Thank you, and have a great trip! As we'll soon see, dinosaurs played a major role in the Jurassic period, but to get there, they had to overcome many obstacles. Their place, they won it at the price of multiple efforts of adaptation and radiation. Emblematic animals of the previous period were doomed to extinction. They were unable to adapt to the drastic changes the Earth was undergoing at that point in its history. Chaos reigned for many millennia. While fauna was greatly affected by the mass extinction, vegetation was much less so. The vegetation that was still largely present enabled new species, better adapted to this new climatic and geological order, to occupy the places left vacant within terrestrial ecological niches. During the Triassic, even though the first dinosaurs made a remarkable entry onto the terrestrial scene, they were still far from being the main heroes of the period. Instead, archosaurians of the crocodilian lineage, such as Rhesuscians, reign supreme on the single continent. They are powerful and can reach very large sizes, up to 7 meters or 23 feet for the most imposing. Over the course of evolution and during the Upper Triassic, the first dinosaurs emerged and tried to carve out a place for themselves in the Earth's ecosystem. But there was still a long way to go. Indeed, the Triassic ends on a dramatic note. the period ends as it began, with a biological crisis. This Triassic-Jurassic crisis, the fourth mass extinction in the history of our planet, undoubtedly had its origins in the tearing apart of Pangaea. This unique continent, formed at the end of the Carboniferous period, was faced with the appearance of enormous faults as a result of intense tectonic activity. To understand this, let's take a look at the Earth from the inside. As you can see, in places the Earth's crust is becoming thinner and weaker, and so it ends up cracking a little more each time. The magma in the Earth's entrails, which is under constant pressure, finds in these cracks a way to evacuate this tension. It rushes through the cracks in the crust, eventually ripping open the Earth's surface. Over hundreds of thousands of years, tons of magma burst out of these fissures, tearing the continent of Pangaea apart with ever-increasing force. It broke up and scattered. From this fracture, over the millennia, the North Atlantic Ocean was born. As you can imagine, this kind of terrestrial activity is not without consequences for the climate, and by extension, for wildlife. The beginnings of a mass extinction are taking shape. A biological crisis on a massive scale seems inevitable. But as the saying goes, after the rain comes the sunshine. And so it is that after every biological crisis, the living world ends up renewing itself. It must adapt, evolve, and diversify until it regains a certain harmony and stability. After the crisis, there were many vacancies to be filled in all the planet's ecological niches. Could this be why the dinosaurs were able to begin their ascent to Earth? No doubt. But before we meet these famous emerging species, let's discover the Earth's climate and geology in the early Jurassic period. We'll surely learn more about the reasons for their rise by studying the context of the time in greater depth. The Jurassic began around 200 million years ago and ended 145 million years ago. The period therefore spans around 55 million years. The Jurassic takes its name from the Jura, a region of France where scientists have found limestone and numerous fossils dating from this period. Like the Triassic, the Jurassic is subdivided into three major periods, each characterized by specific events. The first is the Lower Jurassic. This first stage is a kind of introduction to the Jurassic. It began around 200 million years ago and ended around 175 million years ago. The remains of the Triassic are still very much in evidence, but significant changes are beginning to take place. This Jurassic sub-period lays the foundations, so to speak, for a new period under construction. During the Lower Jurassic, we can see the huge Pangaea continental rift forming between the northern and southern hemispheres. We can also see that the Tethys Ocean, located on the right in the Pangaea Trough, inevitably rushes into this fault and helps to free the two future continents, Gondwana to the south and Laurasia to the north. But in addition to these geographical and geological changes, the world of living things is also taking a new turn. New species are emerging. Let's move on to the Middle Jurassic, which spans the period from 175 million years ago to 161 million years ago. Here is a map of the world 170 million years ago. we can see a new divide emerging in the northern hemisphere. North America on one side, Eurasia on the other. To the south, future continents such as South America, Africa, India, Australia, and even Antarctica are still strongly linked, even if the beginnings of a few fractures are starting to break apart. For flora and fauna, this is a period of demographic explosion. The living world is becoming increasingly rich and diverse. At the end of the period, around 150 million years ago, in the middle of the Upper Jurassic, from 161 million years ago to 145 million years ago, we can really see that the fractures to the south of the hemisphere are becoming more pronounced. The part of Gondwana that forms India, Australia, and Antarctica is moving further and further away from the part that still unites South America and Africa. To the north, we can also see new changes, notably on the continent that will soon form Europe. For the moment, it's just a huge archipelago in the heart of the Tethys Ocean. As you can see, geography underwent many changes during the Jurassic period. The face of the Earth as we know it today is slowly taking shape. A second continental waltz is underway. This time, it was not the formation of a single continent, but rather the formation of several perfectly distinct continents. Such geological changes have major consequences for climate. In the first part of the Triassic period, temperatures rose sharply. However, from the second period onwards, temperatures softened markedly. This decline continued during the Jurassic, but temperatures rose again somewhat during this period, mainly due to the terrestrial activities mentioned above. There are no polar caps yet to cool the Earth a little and slow down the sun's rays. Nevertheless, the climate is quite favorable to vegetation, and by extension, to the land animals that benefit from this plant cover. The Jurassic was hot and humid, unlike anything we experience on Earth today. This climate favors the expansion of flora. The plant cover is lush and well-developed, allowing wildlife to fill numerous ecological niches. Look how incredible the Jurassic forest is. The landscape before us is simply magnificent. After such a crisis, such dense, lush plant cover is reassuring. A few million years ago, the scene was very different. All was desolation, utter chaos. This time, life seems to inhabit this forest. Let's begin our journey in the heart of this undergrowth. Afterwards, we're sure to meet some of the forest's inhabitants and discover some emblematic Jurassic species. In what landscape did our famous Jurassic dinosaurs evolve? To understand the future diversification of dinosaur species, it's important to know not only the context, but also the world in which they evolved. As we've seen, the latter benefited from a lush vegetation cover. But what does it really look like? From small bushes to large trees, vegetation offers multiple ecological niches for insects and other vertebrates. Vegetation supports herbivores, but also small carnivores that feed on insects, for example. Other predators take advantage of the abundance of small carnivorous and insectivorous prey to feed in their turn. the large carnivores themselves feed on them, and the circle is complete. In other words, a complete food chain is created thanks to all the plants you can see in front of you. In the forest, you'll find a bit of everything, from herbivores to carnivores, insectivores, and even omnivores. This dietary diversity is made possible by the wide variety of vegetation and environments found in the Jurassic. You have to go deep into the forest to understand this. Once in the undergrowth, you can see not only the richness of the plant cover, but also the different strata of the forest, from the lowest and fullest to the highest and sparsest. You can also see how varied the genera and species are, to get to the heart of Jurassic vegetation, let's start with ferns. Yes, they're still with us today, as they may have been in the past, and they're even benefiting from new evolutionary radiations. They make up a large part of the plant cover of the period. Within this large group, there are many families, genera, and species. All families, sometimes quite different from one another, find their place within a particular ecological niche. These differences in ferns also lead to diversification in the insects and small animals that depend on them. Among Jurassic ferns, we can cite several families, such as Glycania, truncata, Osmundastrum, Dipterodaceae, while other, taller ferns, such as Dixonaceae and Cyatheaceae, are also well represented. The great diversity of these ferns plays a decisive role in Jurassic forests, as we have just said, as they form the basis of certain ecological niches. But their position in the forest also explains why they so perfectly embody this role in the ecosystem. Ferns are part of what we call the lower strata of the forest. To put it another way, they form a sort of green meadow in the undergrowth. It's a green paradise for insects, but also for small animals, which find shelter and food in abundance. Although small, not always, ferns are also home to the giant sauropod family. But we'll come back to that a little later, once we've completed our overview of Jurassic plants. During this period, ferns were abundant, but there were also many other plants. After the ferns and small bushes that form the undergrowth, there's a middle stratum and a higher stratum that make up the forest proper. This Jurassic forest is luxuriant and abundant all over the globe. Today, it's hard to imagine that vegetation could be so abundant all over the Earth, as different continents and geological zones embody different types of climate and therefore vegetation. But in the Jurassic, even on the fringes of present-day Greenland, known for its ice and biting cold, vegetation was rich and well-developed, unlike today, when it is rather low and sparse. Three main groups of arborescent plants can be identified in the Jurassic. The first group comprises conifers, also known as pinophytes. This group includes the Cheirolipidaceae, a family that is now extinct. The Araucariaceae and Podocarapaceae, on the other hand, are still around today. Pinophytes are large trees. They are easily distinguished from others by their cone-shaped fruit. These cones serve as the plant's reproductive organs. On this tree, some cones are male, others female. These trees are called gymnosperms. Reproduction requires a little help from Mother Nature, particularly from the wind, but also from a few insects of the Mecopteran family, which have been active since the Middle Jurassic. They also provide an ecological niche for small insectivorous animals that settle in the forest. Everything is linked in nature. The great advantage of these pinophytes is their ability to establish themselves in a wide variety of environments, even the harshest. In this way, they have managed to colonize a large part of the world's landmass, even intertropical regions or salty environments, near coasts and maritime zones, for example. But this will not be enough to compete with angiosperms, the flowering plants that will soon occupy a large part of their territory. In addition to pinophytes, the forest is also populated by ginkgophytes. These species of ginkgos are the dominant trees in the canopy. They can reach up to 40 meters or 130 feet in height. Ginkgo digitata and adiantoids can be seen in this forest. Digitata trees have fan-shaped indented leaves. These species thrive in tropical and semi-tropical climates. The absence of cones and their famous palmate leaves distinguish them from previous conifers. These species will also provide new opportunities for the young fauna that gradually settled on planet Earth during the Jurassic Period. Let's return to the lower forest stratum. In this region, it is also colonized by another type of plant, the cycads. The most dominant and emblematic group of the period is undoubtedly the so-called cycadophytes. Cycads are far from reaching the heights of the previous group. Their foliage covers the lower forest floor, rather like ferns. They are found mainly in tropical zones with their characteristic hot, humid climate. This tropical zone is a highly favorable environment not only for these plants, but also for the many insects and small animals that depend on them. Some of these species, such as Pseudotenis and Nilsionia, look a little like palm trees, with a crown of large leaves that fall and form the trunk. Horsetails are also very common, especially in these same wetlands. These plants can serve as food for a number of herbivores, thus promoting the development of a balanced food chain and a stable ecosystem. It's true that while these lower strata benefit insectivores and small carnivores, we can see here that herbivores also find plenty to eat. Among the horsetails, there are two major species, very popular at the time: the neocalamites and the equisetails. In addition to their great diversity of plants, these forests are home to a wide variety of environments. There are jungles such as one might imagine in the Amazon, swamps and low-lying plants, large clearings where the sun floods the ground with its heat, and coastal landscapes. All these environments form diverse ecological niches, and thus benefit a wide variety of species. It's time to go and meet them. Let's stay on the edge of the forest near this swamp and begin our discovery of Jurassic fauna with a group we've been following for some time now, the amphibians. You were expecting to talk about dinosaurs, weren't you? When you think of Jurassic fauna, you immediately think of dinosaurs. They're the emblematic group of the Jurassic and probably the most important of the animal kingdom during this period. But we sometimes forget that many other species contributed to weaving a veritable ecosystem in which these dinosaurs were able to flourish. Each of these species is part of a greater whole, and each has a role to play in the survival of the others. Dinosaurs were far from the only species to occupy the Earth at this time, and the different groups we're now going to look at undoubtedly contributed to their rise. Let's get back to our famous amphibians. During the Carboniferous and Permian periods in particular, amphibians were the main terrestrial predators, so to speak. Their size was sometimes much greater than we would have expected from the amphibians we know today. By the Jurassic period, they had largely lost this prominent position. Despite their great size, the amphibian population declined considerably, to the benefit of new species. After the Triassic crisis, the arrival of the first dinosaurs and the great diversification of lizards, these animals saw their ecological niche shrink dramatically, all of which logically led to a population decline. When there's no more food and a loss of territory, the species slowly dies. Despite this, a few managed to survive the Triassic period. These even managed to settle comfortably into the Jurassic. So all is not lost for our amphibians. During the Middle and Upper Jurassic, we discover a group that continues to grow to the present day through three major families. These are the Lysamphibians. They form the only surviving group of the amphibian class. This pretty Viorella near this watering hole is a great opportunity to get to grips with the new families of Lysamphibians. It's probably one of the oldest frogs and a member of the Anarin family. Feeding on insects, this little Viorella measures just a few centimeters long. However small, it already displays the physical characteristics of frogs as we know them today, including the shape of its head, large eyes, and muscular legs. Without knowing its group or lineage, it's easy to imagine that it's a primitive frog just by observing its behavior in silhouette. The Lysamphibians include the Anarin family and frogs like the one we've just seen. Lysamphibians also include the Urodal family, i.e. salamanders, and the Gymnophian family, vermiform amphibians also known as apodes or Cecilia. It is these last two families that will interest us now. Still in the Jurassic marshes, an insectivore quite different from Viorella roams the same environment. This time it's one of the very first salamanders, according to the latest paleontological research. Carorus sharovi has all the trappings of a salamander. Its triangular head, upward pointing eyes, and distinctive legs are all distinctive. It measures around 20 centimeters or 8 inches. Its head seems flatter than today's salamanders, and the triangular shape is also more pronounced. Studies of Carorus fossils suggest that this small primitive salamander fed on snails, worms, crustaceans, and perhaps even insects. It thrives in freshwater, where it finds everything it needs to survive. In the early Jurassic, a worm-like amphibian also appeared. We rarely think of this type of morphology when we think of amphibians, but worm-like caecilians are indeed part of this large family. They like damp, dense, warm forests. And in marshes, particularly those of North America, this Eocaecilia finds plenty to do. It measures around 15 centimeters or 6 inches long. It is therefore quite discreet. Unlike the modern caecilians we meet on the continent, this one hasn't lost its legs. If you're observant, you'll see that it has 2 small legs at the front, shortly after the head, and 2 more at the back, close to the tail. Modern caecilians have poor eyesight and often live underground. It is therefore possible that our Eocaecilia micropodia, with its legs and eyes a little more developed than modern specimens, enjoys the great outdoors more than its descendants. Like the other amphibians we met, it feeds on insects of all kinds. It has to be said that over the course of time, they too have diversified considerably. The Diptera group, which includes flies and mosquitoes, has seen an explosion of new species. In this swamp, a Tarsophlebbia dragonfly can be seen here. A little further on one of the very common seed plants from the Triassic to the Cretaceous, the Bennettitails Weilandiella, we can also see a new type of dipteran, no doubt a close relative of the cousins. Another small insect, about 6 millimeters long, called Gallimosovelia grioti, can also be seen on the lake. According to the paleontologists who have worked on the subject, this is a water spider and probably the oldest fossil of an aquatic insect of the order Geromorpha ever discovered. This region is ideal for observing insects, so let's stop here for a few moments to take a closer look at a few of them. As we just mentioned, mosquitoes and flies have also undergone a major radiation and population explosion. Climate and the expansion of vegetation have greatly favored the rise of this type of insect. But that's not the only reason. The first insects appeared as early as the Paleozoic era and were mainly terrestrial at first. But the acquisition of wings, and therefore the ability to fly, greatly expanded their range of niches, and by extension, their territory. We find Hymenoptera, including bees, wasps, and ants. Lepidoptera, with 2 pairs of membranous wings, such as butterflies. Diptera, with 2 pairs of wings, such as flies, mosquitoes, and horseflies. And Neuroptera, including lacewings and anteaters. One of the most represented groups of Diptera in the Jurassic is undoubtedly the Stratileidae. This group comprises 2 genera, Stratilia and Vocilla. These flies have wings, contrary to what scientists first thought when studying fossils, particularly those preserved in amber. What led them astray were the fossil remains, without wings. The explanation actually lies in their deciduous wings. Like many modern insects such as ants, these flies probably lost their wings after mating. Sexual dimorphism is also noticeable in these species. Males have enlarged hind legs. This can be explained by mating requirements, since during their lovemaking the male has to position himself above the female and hold on with his hind legs. Lacewings are neuropterans, characterized by 2 pairs of equal-sized membranous wings with numerous clearly visible veins, Jurassic lacewings have much to teach us. Fossils, for example, have revealed that these insects were already using camouflage as a means of survival, particularly in the larval stage. They blend into the background, make themselves forgotten, and can thus hope to slip through the net of nearby predators. Polystoicotes punctata, commonly known as the giant chrysopod, first appeared in the Jurassic Period and was still around until the 1950s to 1960s. Incredible as it may seem, the giant lacewing seems to be back in the news. A specimen was found in Arkansas, USA, in 2012, but it wasn't until 2020 that entomologist Professor Michael Svarla made the connection with Polystoicotes punctata. Insects don't just thrive in the forest. In the aquatic environment, many species are also abundant. Another giant insect. Yes, the Jurassic Period also saw insects of rather exceptional size. But fortunately for us, Morrisonepa, unlike the giant lacewing, has now disappeared. Morrisonepa is one of the giant water bugs, like the genus Lothosaurus, and the latter are not renowned for their beauty or gentleness. These insects are extremely painful to bite, injecting their prey with a saliva packed with enzymes that break down proteins. No chance of escaping. Using its proboscis, the giant bug simply sucks up the delicious cocktail of the prepared mixture, a semi-digested bodily liquid from the prey. If Lothosaurus can prey on snails, crustaceans, fish, amphibians, or even snakes, it may be that our Morrisonepa has the same culinary tastes. Other forms of insects are also making their appearance. As we'll soon see, dinosaurs, particularly feathered ones, but also furry mammals, also emerged in the Jurassic. These feathers and hairs offer new opportunities for insects, which can easily attach themselves to their new hosts. Fleas, for example, which are hematophagous insects that feed on blood, made their grand entrance into the animal kingdom to the great displeasure of their hosts. Finally, it was in the Jurassic Period that the very first snakes appeared. One of the world's oldest snakes, Diablophus, can be seen here. Diablophus, as well as Portugalophus and Parvoraptor, are primitive snakes. Of course, they have much in common with our present-day snakes, notably the particular shape of their skulls, but they also have a few differences. According to fossil studies, even if the remains are few and often incomplete, paleontologists have reason to believe that these snakes still had their legs. If we summarize the Jurassic context seen in this first part of the video, we can see that plants, insects, amphibians, snakes, and other small animals of the forest and lower vegetation provided a rich ecosystem and varied ecological niches. Each in its own way helped the expansion of the dinosaurs. It's impossible to talk about Jurassic fauna without mentioning dinosaurs, of course, so here we are at last, right in the heart of the Jurassic, facing those famous dinosaurs. They are the emblematic animals of the period. They were very diverse in the Jurassic Period, but also very numerous. Remember, dinosaurs first appeared in the Triassic, but their presence was still rather timid. And then, after the crisis, some of them didn't survive. However, The Jurassic did not mark the end of this great group. Quite the contrary. Dinosaurs took over the period and reigned supreme in the four corners of the world. But not everything happened in a day. For them, it all began with the archosaurs, their common ancestor, an animal clade that includes crocodilians, birds, pterosaurs, and of course all dinosaurs. What all these seemingly different species have in common is a particular feature of their anatomy, the gizzard. This muscular part is used to crush hard food. Over the millennia, archosaurs formed various lineages, including the one we're particularly interested in now, the dinosaurs. Their emergence was still rather fragile at the beginning of the Triassic period, especially as the first specimens were already facing major difficulties that were to slow down their evolution initially, the biological crisis that marked the end of the first Mesozoic period. First of all, it took time for nature to recover from the obstacles placed in its path. The Jurassic therefore represents an initial period of calm. The lower Jurassic in particular is a transitional period when nature and the living world gradually reassert their rights. Some species die out, others survive, and that's about it. No major radiation, no demographic explosion of any species. But once the lower Jurassic is over, the middle Jurassic is marked by a great explosion of diversification and the development of numerous species. This demographic and radiative explosion continues into the upper Jurassic, and the vast majority of these species belong to the vast dinosaur family. From the middle Jurassic onwards, the era of the dinosaurs was truly established. Adaptations, radiations, evolutions, diversifications, demographic explosions, everything came together for dinosaurs to become major players in the Jurassic period, and more broadly, in a large part of the Mesozoic. While two major groups of dinosaurs had already appeared in the Triassic, the diversity of ornithischians and saurischians exploded in the Jurassic. Among the ornithischians, mainly herbivores that moved in herds, three major groups appeared that were to expand the dinosaur family: the theriophores, the ornithopods, and the marginocephali. The suborder theriophores means shield bearer in ancient Greek. This gives you a clue as to what makes this group so special. Although they are mostly quadrupedal herbivores, their distinctive feature is their backs, which are armored with bony plates, spikes, or spurs, depending on the species. As we saw when discussing vegetation earlier, there were several strata in the plant cover. Low-growing plants were one of the favorite foods of the dinosaur that now awaits us. It's a very popular dinosaur, recognizable by its famous bony plates alternating in two rows on its back. This is the famous Stegosaurus. His body is quite stocky, but his head is rather small compared to the rest of his body. Scientists are still debating the usefulness of Stegosaurus's bony plates, but several interesting hypotheses have been put forward. One of these is that they may have been used as a deterrent, or even a defensive device against predators. Stegosaurus, especially juveniles, were preyed upon by dinosaurs such as Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus. Recent research also suggests that these plates were gorged with blood and therefore sported a bright red hue that could also greatly intimidate any bold predator. But it's also possible that these famous spikes are simply a courtship tool, or that they have a thermoregulatory function. If they are also vascularized, they can act a bit like a solar panel, capturing heat and transmitting it into the bloodstream to warm the animal's body. But in other circumstances, such as when the animal shakes its plates, it can actually cool its body. In other words, he's got both air conditioning and heating at his fingertips. To get around, he had a good footing on his 4 legs. It has 3 little toes on its front legs and 5 on its hind legs. There are pads under each of them. On the other hand, his posture is a little unusual. If you look at its silhouette, you'll see that its front legs are shorter than its hind legs. The tail is well above the ground, while the head is relatively low. This morphology can be explained by the type of food it consumes, since it feeds on plants low to the ground. It has a beak and small teeth that enable it to cut and chew plants. Another type of dinosaur had bone plates, but they are quite distinct from those of the Stegosaurus. Here's a Nodosaurus, a Borealopelta to be more precise. As you can see, it has a bony plate that forms a sort of band, a bone nodule, hence its name, nodule lizard. The fossils of this Nodosaurus have enabled scientists to study, among other things, the remains of its stomach. We therefore know that it was a great gourmand, particularly fond of the ferns that carpet the forest floor. It must have consumed large quantities to meet its colossal energy requirements. The animal weighed over a ton and was almost 5 meters long. To facilitate digestion of these fatty ferns, the animal also swallowed the occasional stone. As its jaw wasn't much help when it came to chewing, it had to use gastroliths to make the most of the plants it ingested. Let's take a look at one of these cousins, a dinosaur best known for its distinctive tail. You may recognize it from the Ankylosaurus. It's more massive. Some 8 meters long, 2 meters or 7 feet high, and almost 4 tons rest on those 4 impressive legs. Unlike other members of the Theriothera family, he doesn't just have a body covered in thick armor. It also has a large club at the end of its tail. The last caudal vertebrae fuse together to form the club. He also has tendons that enable him to direct and manipulate this club, in particular, to give it a certain impulse to parry or deliver blows. This asset enables him to defend himself against the predators that are rampant in the region where he lives, the riverside forests. But when attacked, he also tended to flatten himself on the ground and wait for the right moment to use his club. Do you have any idea why he adopts this peculiar behavior? If you look closely at his breastplate, you'll see that it covers a good part of his body from head to tail, but not his belly. This is his Achilles heel, his weak point. It's his Achilles heel, his weak spot, and he needs to protect it first if he's to survive in battle. Another peculiarity of this dinosaur is that it also swallowed stones to facilitate digestion of the plants it ingested. This is very common in dinosaurs that don't chew well or have sufficiently developed teeth to do so. Let's take a look at another type of dinosaur, the ornithopoda. They may not be the most familiar to the general public, but they are one of the most successful and longest-lived dinosaur lineages. Just look at the great diversity of subgroups that define this branch. Fabrosauridae, Heterodontosauridae, Hypsilophodontidae, Iguanodontidae, Hadrosauridae, and each of these subgroups has a large number of species. This time, the ornithopods, unlike the theriophores, are herbivores for the most part, but walk more easily on 2 rather than 4 legs. Fabrosaurs are the oldest ornithopoda, but also the most primitive. They were very small compared to other groups, between 60 and 120 centimeters, or 24 inches and 47 inches. Heterodontosaurs were already a little more developed. We see the horny beak appear, but also more complex teeth. Heterodontosaurus, for example, sported 3 types of teeth: sharp teeth that formed a real jaw with fangs, and wide teeth for crushing plants. A new specimen of this group was discovered in 2012, even though it was discovered much earlier. Pegomastax africanus is an astonishing little animal, measuring 45 centimeters or 18 inches long. While its skull is reminiscent of a parrot, its body is more like that of a porcupine and its teeth more like those of a small feline carnivore. Despite its sharp fangs and canines, it's definitely a herbivore, and perhaps even frugivorous, to be quite precise. According to descriptions by Paul Sereno, an American paleontologist from the University of Chicago, the fangs helped it to pick up plants, particularly fruit, and the small teeth in front of the canines were used to cut up the plants. It's also possible that these teeth were used to defend against predators or to protect their territory, for example. The Hypsilophodontidae group is best illustrated by Hypsilophodon. They can be found in every corner of the globe. They are larger than the previous ornithopods we have encountered. Hypsilophodon can reach 2 meters or 7 feet in length and weigh around 25 kilograms or 55 pounds. Its beak, quite similar to that of a turtle, enables it to cut the vegetation on which it feeds. As for its gait, its skeleton seems to indicate that it is undoubtedly a good runner. But the latter is of particular importance here, not because of its running prowess, but because it may have given rise to the next 2 lineages, the hadrosaur and the iguanodont. This time, the latter evolved mainly on 4 legs. However, it's not impossible that they were able to run on their 2 hind legs to escape, for example. Iguanodon was the second dinosaur to be discovered in history. The name given to this group is linked to their teeth, which are quite similar to those of the iguanas we know today. They are savanna dwellers. It feeds on ferns, but also on arborescent plants such as conifers, cycads, or ginkgos, for example. He was able to get to grips with them, as he was able to chew for a long time. We mentioned this earlier in connection with vegetation, and it's important to make it clear here. As you can see from the presentation of these first dinosaur species, all the plants we have seen above provide an ecological niche for dinosaurs that are very different from one another. Ankylosaurs like low-growing plants like ferns, while others like Iguanodon are better equipped and taller, and can take advantage of arborescent plants like conifers or ginkgos. Let's close this little plant parenthesis and pick up where we left off with the study of dinosaurs, and iguanodonts in particular. With research and discoveries evolving day by day, each time revealing a new facet of our distant history, the genus Iguanodon is in the process of being redefined, if we can put it that way. Certain species of Iguanodon, for example, are sometimes given different names, such as beryllium, dolodon, Hypsilospinus, Pterylion, or Wadhurstia. Nevertheless, let's try to establish some general characteristics of the genus by studying Iguanodon bernissartensis. At 5 meters or 16 feet high and 9 meters or 30 feet long, it weighs almost 5 tons. This makes it one of the larger dinosaurs. This herbivore nevertheless had plenty of predators. To defend itself, it's possible that its thumb was a great help. At the very least, it enabled him to curb the ardor of his adversaries. In fact, his very sharp thumb turns into a dagger against carnivores when our Iguanodon feels threatened. Another specificity of the genus is its famous duck-like beak and prehensile tongue, which enable it to tear up vegetation. The subject of its limbs and gait has long been a matter of debate among scientists. Is it a quadruped, a biped, bipedal only in its prime, or when juvenile? Although a few discoveries, notably in 2000, have cleared up a few mysteries, the vagueness is still quite relative. Its long, heavy tail is the main reason for questioning its approach in the first instance. To understand ancient species, we rely on our knowledge in comparison with current species. Here, scientists see some semblance of a kangaroo. Its strong, muscular tail could provide support for the animal, which would then walk on its 2 hind legs. But in the 2000s, paleontologists brought to light an essential new feature of the Iguanodon skeleton. Its caudal vertebrae are connected and rigidified. The first thesis no longer holds. It would seem that the tail is more a kind of balance beam, or even, depending on the situation, a counterweight. Although it moved mainly on its 4 legs, it's not impossible that it also moved from time to time on its 2 hind legs, perhaps to run and escape. The strength of herbivores to defend themselves lies above all in the horde. In a group, you're stronger. They protect each other. Iguanodons were no exception to the rule. They may also have formed part of an interspecies horde, alongside ankylosaurs, for example, to increase their chances of curbing the ardor of nearby predators. Especially as these dinosaurs did not feed on the same plants, they had everything to gain and nothing to lose by joining forces to preserve their safety. Let's take a look at the last group of ornithopods, the hadrosaurs. According to certain paleontological studies, hadrosaurs are descended from iguanodonts. It's true that they share many common characteristics. For example, they share the duck beak. Hadrosaurs have a flattened skull, enlarged in the shape of a beak to enable them to reach and gather leaves from trees in tropical forests. This ability and their dentition are assets. They will thus be favored in future evolutionary radiations over other herbivores that need gastroliths, for example, to digest plants. Hadrosaurs were fairly widespread in the Jurassic, but will be even more so in the Cretaceous. They settled all over the planet, in Asia, Europe, and North America. In fact, it was in this region that a new specimen of the genus was discovered in 2021 by students at the University of Reading in Canada. Many types of dinosaur have already been found in the region, but this time, what makes this particular fossil so unique is its age, its state of preservation, and in particular, its fossilized skin. There's no doubt that these latter elements have a lot to tell us, especially since this Hadrosaurus is thought to be a juvenile. Paleontologists may also learn more about the growth and development of these dinosaurs. Let's take a look at our final group of ornithischian dinosaurs, the marginocephalans. The marginocephalans are a special clade of dinosaurs. Although they are all herbivores, they can be bipedal or quadrupedal. What they have in common is the narrow horizontal ridge of bone at the back of their skulls. This group was to develop more extensively in the following period, the Cretaceous. But some of its members can already be seen on the Jurassic Plain. One of the best-known groups of marginocephalans is the ceratopsians. They were the group's first members. They appeared at the end of the Jurassic in present-day China. Unlike their future descendants, our first ceratopsians did not yet have the famous ruff like that of the famous Triceratops. They have an armored body and a rostral bone in the jaw. This beak-like bone enables them to tear up plants with disconcerting ease. This jaw can be seen in action in Psittacosaurus, for example. Bipedal, it is the size of an antelope. Like our modern rodents, its teeth are self-sharpening. They wear down to create a sharp edge that can cut through the toughest plants. Despite its effective jaws for cutting plants, it is not yet very well equipped in terms of digestion. It must therefore use gastroliths to crush food in its digestive system. Many Psittacosaurus fossils have been found. In some cases, up to 50 gastroliths have been found. Paleontologists believe that these gastroliths may have been stored in the gizzard, the muscularized part of the stomach. Our Psittacosaurus closes the chapter on ornithischians. Now it's time to discover the member of the second dinosaur clade, the Saurischia. In the Jurassic, the Saurischia also largely continued their evolution. The branch led to birds. Within this group of dinosaurs, two main subgroups soon emerged: the theropods, mostly bipedal carnivores, and the sauropods, large quadrupedal herbivores. Let's start with the theropods, which underwent a meteoric diversification. As we saw earlier, many herbivores populated the Jurassic soil. Herbivores meant prey, and prey meant predators. While herbivores were numerous, carnivores were also widely present. One of the best-known Jurassic predators is undoubtedly the Allosaurus. Often confused with Tyrannosaurus, Allosaurus is one of the great predators of the Jurassic. It has a huge jaw, crenellated and curved teeth that enable it to tear flesh, and if it loses a few of them in an over-aggressive attack, they soon grow back. In addition to this extraordinary dentition, He also has short but robust forelegs. They are useful for grabbing prey and holding on tight. He also uses them to butcher his victims. The hind limbs are longer, but just as vigorous. They are also equipped with claws. Carnivorous and perhaps occasionally a scavenger, Allosaurus can also hunt in groups to attack large Jurassic herbivores. There's no stopping it. This bipedal dinosaur is perfectly equipped to be a top Jurassic predator, but it's not the only one to covet this position. Let's take a look at the Megalosaurus. At 7 meters or 23 feet long and 3 meters or 10 feet high, it's quite imposing. It was the very first dinosaur to be described and given a name. In fact, it means great lizard in ancient Greek. It has many of the same characteristics as the Allosaurus. These include short, clawed forelimbs, longer, sturdier hind limbs, and a crenellated, blade-like jaw. It was one of the most feared predators of the Jurassic period. In another genre, there are also dromaeosaurs, which began to emerge very slowly in the Jurassic, but would become more widely established in the Cretaceous. This time, we're dealing with a medium-sized carnivore. Its distinctive feature is that it is covered in feathers. At least that's what the latest research has revealed about it. It shares many characteristics with primitive birds. Body shape, feathers, legs, and the famous claw on the second finger are just some of the bird-like features. This group of dinosaurs brings us to the avian dinosaurs, such as Archaeopteryx. Archaeopteryx is another type of feathered dinosaur. It has all the attributes of certain birds. However, its reptilian side cannot be ignored either, with characteristics that define it as a small bipedal dinosaur akin to a Compsognathus, for example. This strange bird is undoubtedly the one that makes the link between dinosaurs and birds. With its claws and long tail helping it to maintain balance, it can easily hunt insects and small animals. Speaking of small animals, isn't the Jurassic known as the Age of Giants? So what's really going on? If we look at the fossils of the largest known dinosaurs, a certain number can be placed in the Cretaceous period rather than the Jurassic. So why do we refer to the Jurassic as the Age of Giants? Is it a linguistic error? Misinformation? A popular misconception? No. The Jurassic can indeed be recognized as the era of the giants. The huge, long-necked sauropods were very numerous during this period, with a wide variety of species, justifying the term Era of the Giants. Let's go and meet them. Despite their immense size, we have nothing to fear. These giants are herbivores. Incidentally, to popularize the history of dinosaurs, the term herbivore has been used until now, but it's better to call them vegetarians. Grass didn't appear until the following period, the Cretaceous. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at these famous Jurassic vegetarians. The first one we're going to meet is a Diplodocus. According to scientific estimates, Diplodocus halorum measured 30 meters or 100 feet. and weighed 24 tons. Its neck is almost 6 meters or 20 feet long, enabling it to reach food inaccessible to many herbivorous dinosaurs. It can reach the tops of trees, such as conifers, but it can also extend its neck and feed on aquatic marsh plants or horsetail beds. Its extremely long tail is also very useful. Made up of 80 caudal vertebrae, it acts as a counterweight, but can also be a powerful deterrent to predators. According to a hypothesis put forward by certain paleontologists, this massive tail also plays a role in courtship. To demonstrate their power, males would slam this giant whip to the ground. They estimated that the noise generated during these parades could have reached 200 decibels, a sound more powerful than a plane taking off at less than 100 meters or 330 feet. Diplodocus shares its territory with other gigantic animals, such as Bothria spondylus, another Jurassic mastodon classified as a sauropod, measuring almost 20 meters or 66 feet long. The Brachiosaurus genus is undoubtedly one of the best known to the general public. The full name of the genus's only species is Brachiosaurus altithorax. It too is one of the largest animals ever to walk the earth. It measures around 25 meters or 82 feet in length, and no less than 12 meters or 40 feet in height. Each of the vertebrae in his neck measures 70 centimeters or 28 inches, and he has 12 of them. Despite his oversized body, he has a small head. His guilty pleasure? The famous large trees we saw in the forest in the first part of the video, but also the cycads with their tender, tasty leaves. Despite its immense size, a serious competitor will soon be arriving in the Cretaceous, the Titanosaurus. After a long stroll through these Jurassic forests, it's time to see what's going on below sea level. The ocean is teeming with extraordinary creatures. Since the Triassic, the marine world has also undergone many upheavals. At first glance, terrestrial fauna is rich and diverse. But what about underwater life? Is underwater life also flourishing? Let's find out. In the heart of the Jurassic Ocean, of course, we find many of our famous shell animals, which form one of the bases of the food chain. Some of them are very special. We first encountered them in the Triassic, and they continued their reign of the shallows during the Jurassic. These are the ammonites. They are so numerous and diverse that scientists consider them to be stratigraphic markers. In other words, depending on the fossil species found, they are able to determine the age of the soil. Ammonites are therefore abundant in the ocean, providing a veritable food source for small and medium-sized predators. But ammonites are not always easy prey. At least some species are undoubtedly difficult to attack by small predators. Indeed, paleontologists have unearthed an ammonite measuring almost 2 meters or 7 feet in diameter. While these cephalopods are literally swarming all over the world's waters, they are far from the only ones to roam these marine territories. Predators are on the prowl. In the Triassic, we were able to see some great marine reptiles, such as the Nothosaurus. Unfortunately for them, despite their impressive power, they were unable to survive the crisis that marked the end of this period. The majority of the marine reptiles of the time, such as Hooposuchians and Thalattosaurians, suffered the same fate. Only one group managed to defy the climatic changes and geological obstacles imposed by nature during and after the Triassic crisis. It's the ichthyosaurs. Thanks to the latest discoveries by paleontologists, we now know that these marine reptiles were warm-blooded animals and that they gave birth to their young in the open sea. Skeletons of embryonic ichthyosaurs have been found inside the bodies of adult individuals, sometimes even in a position indicating that they were ready to give birth. Their size varied greatly from species to species. The smallest measured barely 1 meter or 3 feet in length, but the largest specimens could reach 20 meters or 66 feet. If they are often compared to dolphins, it's not just for their elongated snouts and sharp teeth, but for the similarities in their way of life. They are adapted to a pelagic lifestyle, but can also descend to the depths. They feed on fish and ammonites. Despite their formidable rise and great adaptability, the ichthyosaurs were to face stiff competition from the massive arrival of the plesiosaurs. Plesiosaurs were another major group to emerge in the Triassic, completing the large family of Jurassic marine superpredators. They have small heads, long necks, and bodies similar to turtles. They are also characterized by a short tail and 2 pairs of large fins. Plesiosaurus is a typical species of this order. It measures up to 5 meters or 16 feet in length. Its neck alone accounts for a large part of its length. Contrary to popular belief, its neck was not very movable. It was even rather stiff and unable to bend to feed, as swans, for example, can. It occupies more or less the same ecological niche as our Ichthyosaurus. In other words, it gradually took its place. It fed on fish and small prey, such as belemnites, animals belonging to the cephalopod clade. A fetus was found in one of the fossils studied, enabling scientists to confirm that plesiosaurs were viviparous. The female gave birth to just one offspring at a time. Guided by her maternal instinct, she took care of him during his early years, taking the time to teach him everything he needed to know, such as how to find the most beautiful belemnite specimens. This way, he could fend for himself later on in this blue immensity. The Pliosaurus is another of the most ferocious marine reptiles found in waters all over the world. It even terrorizes other marine reptiles, such as our Ichthyosaurus. Its jaws, armed with 130 sharp teeth, are enough to make the ocean tremble with fear. Long and razor-sharp, they kill with one clean stroke. Its size is matched by its formidable dentition. It could reach 13 meters or 43 feet in length. Its swimming legs, 4 powerful limbs, propel it at high speed so that it can charge at its victims. The Pliosaurus is rightly nicknamed the T-Rex of the seas. Pliosaurs aren't the only ones to conquer the ocean. Crocodiles are also taking to the sea. To illustrate the crocodilian order, I suggest you discover Cricosaurus bambergensis. It lives in shallow seas, particularly near archipelagos, where it finds everything it needs to survive. Contrary to the image we have of crocodiles, whose ancestor it is, it shares some similarities with other aquatic animals, such as dolphins. In particular, it has a caudal fin and limbs that are more akin to swimming legs than to functional legs for terrestrial mobility. Rather voracious, reactive, and fast, it doesn't hesitate to pounce on squid or fish. During the Jurassic period, a new lineage of marine turtles appeared in the aquatic world. Fossil remains of sea turtles have been discovered in Bavaria, southern Germany. The Solnhofia parsonsi turtle. This isn't all that surprising when you consider that the region at the time was, unlike today, a kind of tropical archipelago. The sea was shallow and populated by sponge reefs of all kinds. While it's easy to recognize a turtle's silhouette, a few details show that they were not yet as evolved as our modern-day turtles. Their legs, for example, are not yet paddle-shaped, but rather finger-like. This means they can move more easily along the coast. Secondly, unlike our turtles, they are not equipped with the famous salt-eliminating glands. They do, however, have the same pointed snout and triangular head. Other species, notably those in the Plesiocheilus and Thalassemus genera, populate the archipelago. These turtles had to be wary of a powerful predator that roamed both fresh and salt waters. Hypodus lived in the same geographical areas as certain marine reptiles and crocodilians. While the latter was undoubtedly preyed upon by marine reptiles twice its size, this did not prevent it from finding plenty of prey to sink its teeth into. It is a durophagus predator, meaning that no hard shell or prey frightens it. It feeds not only on belemnites, but also on other small prey, thanks to its specialized teeth. Its teeth are wide and flat, designed to crush and crush. They move quickly with their well-developed pectoral fins, making them a rather active and voracious predator. To reproduce, hybodonts lay their eggs in the water. A sort of spiral egg case was attached to the marine vegetation by a small tendril. We'll now leave the aquatic world behind us on the images of this little chord of life and head for the sky. As we already saw when we looked at the Triassic period, the wide diversification of insects and their growing population in the forest heights, as well as the presence of large predators on the ground, favored the expansion of flying lizards. During the Triassic period, one of the first groups of pterosaurs, the Rhamphorhynchids, appeared. Small in size, they were still quite primitive. But the Jurassic changed all that and shook things up a bit among these sky gods. Whereas in the Triassic we could admire Eudimophodon with a wingspan of around 1 meter, by the Jurassic, species such as Rhamphorhynchus with a wingspan of 2 meters or 7 feet were appearing. But it's far from the only one to roam the skies. One of the largest Jurassic pterosaurs is Dirkgiakonath with a wingspan of 3 meters or 10 feet. The Middle Jurassic also saw the emergence of a new family of pterosaurs. They are called pterodactyls. They can be distinguished from the more primitive pterosaurs by their shorter tails, absent fifth toes, and fewer teeth. They are generally smaller than our previous pterosaur specimens. Their average wingspan varies up to 1 meter or 3 feet in length, but some reached a wingspan of 3 meters or 10 feet in the Jurassic. These carnivores feed on fish, but also on small land animals on occasion. To help them in their predatory task, they are equipped with 90 small, fine, conical teeth. Large numbers of pterosaurs appeared in the Jurassic period. Although species diversified and developed even more widely in the Cretaceous, it is clear that they were beginning to make their mark on the Jurassic sky. If the pterosaur branch is diversifying to such an extent, it's because numerous niches among the sky gods are taking shape. To find their place, they had to adapt to their environment according to their needs. Pterosaurs come in all diets, insectivores of course, but also piscivores, filter feeders, and duraphages in the marine world, and carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores on the mainland. There are also changes on land, with new small mammalian animals. In addition to the ever-popular dinosaurs that marked the history of the Mesozoic, mammals also made a timid appearance, as early as the Triassic, and continued their slow evolution during the Jurassic. Indeed, amidst the thousands of dinosaurs, it's hard to find a place for mammals in the Jurassic living world. Nevertheless, mammals did not give up. Biological crisis or lack of adaptation, vacancies are forming in certain environments. One man's misfortune is another man's gain. These ecological niches were soon exploited by newcomers. During the Triassic, in the center of Pangaea, the climate was rather dry, but following the breakup of Pangaea, the climate became hot and humid. As a result, vegetation flourished, and as we've seen several times, lush jungles soon covered a large part of the land, benefiting a large number of animals: dinosaurs, reptiles, pterosaurs. But not only. Some species will adapt and take advantage of this particular environment to occupy a tropical and arboreal environment. These include small, arboreal animals such as the Shenshu and Jianshu genera, and mammals. Shenshu is a small animal measuring 18 centimeters or 7 inches, with a long tail of 20 centimeters or 8 inches, and a weight of around 300 grams. Its prehensile tail is one of the features that led paleontologists to classify it as an arboreal animal. The Jianshu genus comprises 2 species, the linglong and the sonjie. They differ from the Shenshao genus despite some similarities. The first incisor is distinctly smaller in Jianshu, and it also has ovoid molars. Measuring around 20 centimeters or 8 inches long, it weighs just 40 grams, according to scientific estimates. Linglong is slightly larger, weighing around 80 grams. What's most striking about these 2 very special genera is not so much their arboreal nature, even if this shows a formidable adaptation within the mammalian lineage. It's also the emergence of the characteristics of the first mammals. In addition to their dentition, notably the mandibular joint characteristic of the mammalian clade, we can also see by observing their fossils that the skeleton has 3 very specific bones in the middle ear. This means they were equipped with eardrums, which transformed air vibrations into sound. This shows that mammals are able to establish themselves over the long term by occupying specific ecological niches, diversifying, adapting, and evolving. Many other surprises await us as we discover the mammalia forms, and in particular, the mammalia, the mammals that gave rise to our contemporary fauna. But that's another story, another period, another journey. See you in the Cretaceous to find out.